So, it is time to test, and you can probably imagine yourself, the process of setting up 14 iPhones from all these different generations was an interesting one. It is pretty cool though, that the iPhone that I had is running iOS 1.0. That's kind of rare, and it means a whole lot of things you would expect on a phone are just not here, including the App Store, but I was quite surprised to see that the OS still ran smoothly. Sadly, for the sake of making these comparisons, I did have to update it to iOS 3, and I also had to send a few phones back because of dead batteries, but finally we did get there. And so let's start by comparing unlocking. You'll notice on the 5S, which now runs iOS 12, Apple starts defaulting to 6-digit pins as opposed to 4 digits previously, and the point of that is to overcome something called brute forcing, which is where someone basically tries as many combinations as they can until they eventually guess it. The iPhone 6S from 2015 and onwards, those phones all have the option for iOS 13, the latest software. That's kind of amazing. If we take a look then at CPU performance over time, it's kind of amazing. Between the 3G and the 3GS, the score is almost 4 times higher. Between the 4 and the 4S, it is a 3 times jump. Between the 5 and the 5S, almost 4.5 times. These are astronomical leaps in performance. After this point, there aren't any jumps that are as significant in terms of percentage gain, but between the 7 and 8, you're still getting almost twice the CPU power, which is a lot. The 10S was a pretty small increment over the 10, but the 11 Pro, actually a bigger jump than I was expecting. But the biggest jump comes when we compare where we are now to where it started, and on this benchmark at least, the score now is 1,000 times higher than the first iPhones. That's crazy. It's time for cameras, and let me tell you, trying to carry 14 iPhones at the same time is a logistical problem. But we got there, and what I've done is captured 4 photos, but with each photo I've captured one version on every single iPhone, and so you can see the progress made as we go up the ranks. The improvement in the quality of shots is going to be most noticeable in low light, which I'll show you in a minute, but during the day there is one thing you'll notice. Dynamic range improves massively, the ability to capture detail in both the bright and the dark parts of the image, and I would say up until the iPhone 7, something is lacking, and this somewhat addresses the misconception that smartphones have plateaued, that they're not evolving, because actually a big part of this improvement has happened in the last few years. And for perspective, we're going to switch back to the iPhone 2G, just to see how that compares. If we pull up a new image in a similar lighting condition, I'll cycle through it a bit faster, but you should notice the same trends. The shadows become better exposed, and the bright areas more well controlled, generally speaking. The iPhone XS is a notable turning point where dynamic range finally gets really good, even though that phone in most other senses was quite an iterative upgrade. And again, here is our comparison to the iPhone 2G at the beginning. But another thing worth noting is that the iPhone 11 Pro introduces an ultra-wide camera for the first time on an iPhone. Now for low light, I found a staircase that was pretty much unlit. It wasn't pitch black, I could still see with my eyes, but dark. And you'll see the first few iPhones pick up almost nothing, just a glimmer of light. And the interesting thing about this is that that trend barely changes. Even the iPhone 5S, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6S, it's not until the iPhone 7 that we see a jump in low light performance. This again plateaus until the iPhone XS, which does a better job of dealing with noise and manages to produce low-light photos with more natural colors. But then, you can see the impact that night mode makes on the iPhone 11 Pro, and if we swing back to where we started, it is unbelievable to think that these two phones are shooting the exact same scene.